Content warning. The stories and themes shared throughout this podcast may contain themes that can be distressing for you. If needed, please pause and do what you need to do to take care of yourself. If needed, please reach out to a mental health professional for support.
Welcome back to another episode of Resilient AF with Blair and Alana. And yes, we are both here today. And
Hello.
so is Jessica Fein. Did I say that right?
You did say that right.
Yes. Yes. I love when I pronounce names right. She's absolutely amazing. I met her through the grief community. She's the author of Breathtaking, a memoir of family, dreams, and broken genes, and the host of I Don't Know How You Do It podcast, featuring raw, real, and rare conversations with people whose lives seem unimaginable. In fact, Alana and I were both guests on her show. She writes the Grace in Grief column for Psychology Today, and her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Newsweek, the Boston Globe, HuffPost, and other leading publications. Her work encompasses hope and humor, grit and grace, the tools that make up her personal survival kit. I was going to say, and her personality, which is also true.
I'll take that.
And your story is something of heartbreak and inspiration, and I want to invite you to share your story.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here with both of you. Thank you for having me. I'm huge fans, as you know, and I loved having the two of you on my show. So yeah, my story. So I guess, when we think about my story as it pertains to grief, it started when I was in my late 20s. And that was a long time ago. And I have really lived most of my adult life profoundly grieving. When I was 27 and my sister was 30, she died suddenly. I was the youngest of three, and my middle sister was my best friend. And we had been on the phone a couple of hours earlier. I was at work. She was a new mom, and she would call me every day, and I'd be like, I'm at work. Hello. But, so it was. And she was out playing with her baby, and she went into cardiac arrest and died suddenly. And that, changed everything for me. Not only did it change who I was and how I saw myself, but it really changed how I saw the world. And I thought that would be the defining bad thing that happened in my life. Like I thought that would probably be the worst thing that ever happened to me. And it was a defining moment in my life for sure. And it was absolutely one of the worst things that happened. But what I had no idea at that point and could never have known was that that would be really like the first act in a lifetime of unimaginable loss. So over the next couple of decades, I lost both of my parents, so relatively young, and my older sister, who went in for a routine breast exam and found out she had stage 4 lung cancer. So, just kind of huge, horrible loss. And yet none of that was like the quote unquote big loss, capital, all capitals, exclamation points, etc., which was the death of my daughter. My daughter Dahlia died 3 years ago, 1 week after her 17th birthday. And so, I have really learned what it is to be a lifelong griever. I learned most of what it means to figure out how to deal with the most horrific things one can imagine and have a life from my daughter, from watching her, from watching how she had all of her functionality taken away from her over her 17 years, her ability to walk and talk and eat and breathe without a ventilator, and ultimately her ability to move. For 2 years, she wasn't able to move. And she continued to figure out ways to find joy and to be part of the world and to give off her most amazing sweetness and love and to really not spend her days curled up in the fetal position, which she would have had every right to do. So she was my guide.
Wow,
So,
that's a lot of loss you've experienced, and what struck me is the different roles you've experienced loss as, and like the different relationships you've had. So you've You've grieved as a sister, as a best friend, then the grief of your own of losing your only other sister who was alive, then being a grieving daughter, and then eventually becoming a grieving mother.
Yeah. And, what's one of the things that has been a really interesting perspective for me is having been lost my sibling at that formative time and then being the mother of two kids who lost their sibling because I have three kids
Yeah.
has been kind of interesting. But the other thing that I learned through the grief with Dahlia in particular is about other kinds of grief, right? Because I had no idea that grief was like more than we grieve when somebody dies, like, traditional Hallmark card grief. And learning about, I mean, anticipatory grief, yeah, for sure, but the whole notion of ambiguous grief, which was not something
Hmm.
that I had any idea, I had no idea what it meant. And I lived that for a very long time.
Completely. And I want to speak to something because I had just read an article that you wrote for Psychology Today about the 3-year anniversary of losing Dahlia. And you talk about something, and I'm hoping you can elaborate on more about the different milestones that Dahlia reached and her place in the family, and then having her younger siblings now be older than than her.
Yes, right, because Dahlia was the middle. And so when, and she died, as I've now said it a couple times, at
Hmm.
17. And my younger child, who's 2 years younger than Dahlia, when he became 17, and now this week he's going to be 18, that is so discombobulating. And that's something that I really experienced because, we all define ourselves by our place within our family structure to a certain extent, up until a certain point. So I was, the youngest of three. And, that's kind of how you exist and carry on through the world when you're, until you go on and create whatever life you create away from your nuclear family or your family of origin. But when I became older than my sister, it was
Hmm.
just so strange because, of course, I still think of my sister in certain respects as 30, but then I also think about her aging alongside me. So, yes, that was very, very strange. The other thing is that even in Dahlia's lifetime, as my younger son, Theo, as he became developed skills and was able to do things that she wasn't. And a
Hmm.
perfect example in the role reversal they experienced is when Theo was a baby, Dahlia like thought he was hers. She was just such the little mamala, and she would feed him. Like she just loved to feed him, and she would help, as he was like learning to scribble and whatever. She just loved mothering him. And as she lost her functionality, he, of course, did so much for her. So, she lost the ability ultimately to eat, but before she, she had a feeding tube from age 9. But before that, when she was, she had a lot of tremors, and when she would be shaking, he would be now steadying her hand. He would be helping her write. So all these things that she helped him do, and then we watched as he advanced beyond where she would ever get and where she had once been both. And that was really hard. And I think in many respects, in those early years, we saw what she was losing based on what he was gaining, right? When they were itty bitty and we
Hmm.
could see him surpassing.
Right, because there's so many developmental milestones that happen
Yeah.
when you're young and having them being somewhat close in age.
Exactly.
It's like,
And
yeah.
I know a lot of people who have kids with these insidious genetic diseases, and many of them never develop, right? From birth, they just don't have that functionality. And the thing that like extra twist of cruelty in the Dahlia story is that she was able to do those things, to run and jump and, you know, eat and write and do all these things and speak and play, and then lost that.
Hmm.
And, we're so used as parents to watching our kids gain all these skills. We're not used to seeing them lose them.
Yeah. So it's you had a lot of that anticipatory grief, I'm guessing, as started to lose those skills. And not only were you probably holding your own grief, you were probably holding Dahlia's grief too. How was that as for both of you, for you and
Yeah.
for Dahlia?
Dahlia was very much focused on doing what she could do. She wasn't focused on what she couldn't do.
Hmm.
And, she loved going to school. She went to school her whole life. And, we ended up having to switch schools and we sent her to school with a private nurse. And then she was in a school that was on a hospital grounds. I mean, this was not conventional school, but she wanted to be out there. She wanted to be experiencing things. So for her, I think that the griefiest thing for her was losing the ability to eat. That was huge for her. Um, I think in many ways that was more upsetting for her than ending up in a wheelchair or, other things that she lost. She really, and it makes sense. All of us, like, our food is such a part uh, of socializing, of culture, of
Hmm.
it's so much more than just like what you're putting in your mouth. And in fact, one of the things that I've written quite a bit about is how we had to follow again her lead because when she first got her G tube and was no longer able to eat orally, we decided that we were going to like shield her from all things food related because we thought that would be so mean to like everybody to be
Hmm.
eating in front of her. So for quite some time, I mean, like for a couple of years, when it was dinner time, my husband or I would be in the other room playing with her while one of us ate with the other kids. And then when she went to this new school that I was mentioning a moment ago that was on the hospital grounds, they had cooking class. And she was not the only kid with a G tube. And I was like, what is that? That's like horrible. That's terrible. How can they do that? And the first day that Dahlia went to school there, she came home with these cookies they had baked. And she had like carefully wrapped four cookies, one for each of us in this, thing. And she handed each one to us. And she was so proud. And we realized she wanted to be part of this, just because she couldn't eat, we were like excluding her even further, of course, unintentionally. So from that point on, she became very much a part of the whole food preparation thing. We had got her a chef hat. She was little chef. She would
Hmm.
my husband because I don't cook, and she would always we never missed a family meal after that up until the night before she died because, we realized that being part of the eating that everything that's involved with that is so much more important than the actual eating orally, eating the food.
Completely. Yeah.
Um, I don't know if Lana knows part of your story, and I know you recently were on a trip.
Oh, yes,
Is that
Guatemala.
something that we can talk about it?
Yeah,
About because
yeah,
you had a really beautiful experience and you did some very beautiful traditions.
yeah.
I would love
So
for you
all
to
three of
share about if you can share about all of that.
yeah, all three of our kids were born in Guatemala. My husband and I adopted all three of them. And so we had not been back. I mean, my husband and I had been to Guatemala 5 times for all those adoptions, but we had not been back with our kids until this past Christmas. And we had been waiting for them to tell us when they wanted to go. And so they came to us and they said they were ready. And I knew that I wanted to do something while we were there to honor Dahlia. I wasn't quite sure at first what it would be, but I was working with some folks in Guatemala City and we were talking through some different ideas. And they introduced me to a Mayan priestess in a part of Guatemala that was close to where Dahlia was born. And what's interesting is that there are a lot of different Mayan dialects. So even within Guatemala, people who speak quote unquote Mayan, which isn't really actually what the languages are called, might not be able to understand each other. But we arranged to meet this priestess, Juana, and to have a traditional Mayan fire ceremony, which is what is done to honor people who have died, typically ancestors, right? But also, this ceremony could be used for many other things. It could be used if you wanted help with your business. It could be used, for celebration, for many different things. In this case, it was going to be a memorial ceremony. And so we met the Mayan priestess in this plaza, which is called Baktun, which is actually interesting because it's what it means is where the earth ends, right? So it's kind of like this idea of a liminal space in a way. And it was a very traditional ceremony where she came and we had a translator, which is a whole other story because that was his English, our translator's English wasn't great. So I had to do some workarounds there. But in any event, um, she came and she set up this very traditional altar. And what they do is they set up things that would appeal to the person they're reaching, in this case, Dahlia, right? And so there's some things that are always there, like there's different kinds of incense and different color candles, depending on what kind of ceremony it is. And there was beautiful flower petals and a circle of sugar candy sweetness, because the idea is that when you burn it, this is what's going up and reaching the spirits, and they want it to be, pleasing to the spirits. And then based on the direction of the fire and the way the ashes burn, she, Juana, the priestess, is getting messages from the spirits, from Dahlia. And she's chanting. It was 45 minutes. She's chanting in this dialect that, of course, we didn't understand. And then the translator is understanding them, but he is then translating them to Spanish, which we're then having him put Spanish into the phone so we could do the translation. I mean, the whole thing was like crazy. But in any event, what was fascinating about it was it felt so authentic to all of us. And it was so weird to me because, we're Jewish and we had had a very traditional Jewish funeral, as I've had for every member of my family. And I know those songs and I know the tradition. I mean, I know it far too well, honestly. And yet, this, where we did not understand one thing that the woman was saying, we were in a place we had never been before. Everything was just so foreign and everything was so right. It felt so much more authentic to us. And I think part of that is because we knew that this was, the language Dahlia probably heard first. We were there in Dahlia's homeland. There was just such a feeling of this needed to happen.
Wow. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And you brought up that point of just like the different cultural ways people
Yeah.
grieve and their traditions. And so to go from something which is not so foreign to you, like the Jewish way of mourning, and which I personally find is like a beautiful, I think
Oh
Jews,
yeah, well,
like, yeah.
my nickname is Shiva Girl. I'm the biggest Shiva fan in the world, so I could talk about Shiva all day long.
Wait, that's like a
That's
superhero character in a
I
Marvel
am Shiva
movie.
Girl. Oh,
Shiva
and by the
girl.
way, I will tell you, the first time we actually did come up with the with Shiva Man preceded Shiva Girl, when I was sitting, my first loss 3 months before my sister Nomi that I was talking about earlier was my stepfather. He died 3 months before she did. And we were doing a traditional Shiva. And so, for listeners who might not know, if you're doing your prayer twice a day, you need to have what's called a minyan, right? So, you need to have 10 people who, depending on how religious you are, they may need to be 10 men. In our case, that wasn't true. Women were considered part of the minyan, but you have to be Jewish and you have to be of a certain age, an adult. And so, anyhow, one day we didn't have a minyan and we weren't going to be able to do the Shiva. And the rabbi pulls out his beeper. This was a long time ago, pre-cell
Mhm.
phone, and dials somebody. And the guy shows up, and I'm like, "Who are you? What are you?" And this guy is on like essentially speed dial to show up and complete a minion if they don't have them. And we said, "Okay, that's a superhero, right?
That is.
That's like Shiva guy."
It's
So
thinking of like the Kim Possible theme song, like do 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 do, and it's like
Shiva.
Shiva. Oh
That's
gosh.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's fantastic. To be honest, I forgot what my question was because we went on
Sorry.
a whole side
A little
quest of
Oh,
side
Shiva.
well,
quest.
I was saying it was, yeah, I do love Shiva. I mean, and in
Yeah.
fact, as I've had a few friends recently who have lost people close to them who aren't Jewish, and it's always so weird to me that like the next day they're kind of alone or like back to usual. And I'm like, wait, where's the week? You need the week.
Yeah, who's feeding you? Like who's
Yes.
bringing you food? We had
Right.
this is just like a quick aside. My best friend, her mom is known for making um like for Shivas, making this banana chocolate chip bread. And they call it, and so we call it Shiva loaf.
Oh my God. That's so
But it's
good.
funny because like Alana and I had so much death in such a short period of time. And so as soon as someone died, I'm like, Alana, like
You've
Get
messaged
her,
her.
We need the
like tell
Shiva.
your friend to make the Shiva loaf. Like, let's order some Shiva loaf.
That's so funny. I mean, there were years where I was like, if I see another arugula, like I cannot because like it's not a Shiva till the arugula shows up. But it sounds like Shiva loaf may be better than even arugula.
The Shiva loaf is fantastic. I also got it rebranded as a housewarming Shiva or a housewarming loaf once, which was fantastic.
Loaf.
Loaf. Anyway, but it's different than the way I guess like in Mayan Guatemalan traditions, the way they grieve and honor and I find that is something so beautiful with loss and grief is just seeing how folks are honored, whether it be through a traditional ceremony, whether it be through a Shiva, whether it be through a good written obituary. Just
Yes, I totally agree. And in fact, one of the things I'm working on now is a project that's exploring throughout different cultures and different religions, different
mm,
belief systems, how we connect to the people we've lost.
yeah. And it was so Dahlia, you said you just felt like so right for Dahlia to have that. Um, I'm curious what your other two kids thought about it.
Well, I mean, my eldest was like, as we left, said to me, I want to be buried in Guatemala. And I'm like, okay, let's assume that's not a decision I'm going to be making. Let's assume that's going to be right. I was like, I don't need to
You're
know
like, I've
about that.
done
But
my time
yeah,
of
I was like,
grieving.
wait, no. But I thought it was interesting that that was kind of like the first thing that was, I think it was very important to both of them. I think, being in Guatemala was much more important to both of them than, well, I shouldn't say more important. I should say I was happy to see how they connected from the second they got off the plane with being in Guatemala in general, and then with this experience in particular.
Completely, because I mean, how old were they when you adopted all three of
Um,
them?
my eldest was a year and a half,
Hmm.
and and Dahlia was our youngest. She was 6 months, and then our youngest, our little guy, was 10 months.
Okay. So
So
all
I've
quite
never had a
young.
newborn.
Yeah, all quite young, yet still lived some life in
Yeah,
Guatemala, and it's in their bones and
in their
uh,
brain
in
wiring for
their genetic,
sure.
yeah, in their
Yeah.
genetics and their brain wiring. So that makes sense that they felt this like almost like
Yeah.
sense of, I don't want to say home because it might be, maybe it is, but I don't want to put words into their mouth.
I think
That's
they also loved that they were surrounded by people who looked like them.
yeah.
For example, one of the things in Guatemala, for the most part, the people are shorter than they are here. And my kids are short. And my husband's quite tall, and I think that they loved there. They were kind of like taller than a lot of people, that just isn't something they are accustomed to. And that felt good to them. And they liked being in the majority. It was really interesting because, my husband and I were in the minority. It was a total inverse. And the other thing is, where we were, we traveled quite a bit. It was not Americanized. It was amazing because so much of the time we
Mm.
travel places and everybody speaks English, and this was not that. And it was really great.
Wow. I think that's so beautiful. And I mean, even, for your other kids to experience that, and what a gift for you to bring them there. Do
Yeah.
you,
Oh, we can't wait to go back.
yeah,
In
I was just
fact,
saying, do you have plans to go back?
oh,
Like,
totally. I mean, the only thing is, I will say, in the spirit of being fully honest, I ended up like the last couple of days getting pretty sick there. So just like, so I'm a little nervous, but once I get over that, yes, we're going to go back. And in fact, I kind of fell in love with Antigua, which was at one point the capital of Guatemala now, or it's Guatemala City, but it's just the most beautiful, beautiful city. And we found a school where like an intensive Spanish speaking school or Spanish language learning school. And so at least my husband and I are really interested in doing that. And then, of course, we've been talking about, oh my God, what if we have to leave this country just because, yeah, we're
Hmm.
crazy right now. We won't go into that. But we're like, how funny would it be if we end up moving to Guatemala?
I mean, I think more like not even funny, but like how beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful and something we would not have seen coming, but you never know.
Well, there's a lot of things happening that no one has seen coming. So,
Yeah, it's scary. I'm really scared. I'm really scared for my
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
like, do you mind if we talk about that briefly? Because I think
Sure.
it's really relevant. So for those of you listening, Alana and I are Canadian in Canada.
Mhm.
So our experience with what's happening around the world is only what we see on the news. Um, what's it like for you having two visibly non-white children
I am
with
so
everything
scared.
that's
And
going
then I'll tell
on?
you, we also have gender stuff in my family too, which is right now, I mean, we're just watching DEI be erased and erased and
Mm.
erased. And it's so scary. I try to tell myself that, don't get carried away, don't let the thoughts, make you crazy. But then you read about people who are just like swept off the streets, because they, are just, I'm like, you guys have to go. You have to always have your, US documents with you, your citizenship papers with you. Like it's
Do they
scary.
have they carry that stuff with them?
I want them to. I mean, I don't think most people, I mean, as the
But
like
are they
mom,
doing it?
um, they have pictures of their passports on their phone. Right.
Mhm.
But, it's scary. It is very scary. I worry a lot. And I think it's going to get a lot worse. I mean, we've got it all. We've got like, there's a lot of anti-Semitism now.
Mhm.
For sure, there's so much. Look, if you're not like a white heterosexual
Yeah.
male,
Cis male.
yeah, which of the four of us, one of us fits that bill, right? So,
Mhm.
so my husband will be fine. Although he's Jewish, so
He's
never
Jewish,
mind.
so not really.
Yeah.
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 Not
So
top of the
yeah,
food chain. Top of the food chain, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's I can't even imagine how you feel navigating that.
Mhm.
And I mean, I know a lot of people who feel the same way, like they're scared and they don't feel safe. And I can't imagine what it feels like to not feel safe for you or your family in your home, like in your hometown,
God,
right?
and I just feel so sad for my kids that they are seeing this, that these are the leaders, and when you read about the way they speak about people who are different, it's like every day there's something new. I mean, now getting rid of so many rights for people with disabilities. I mean, that, I think about oh my God, like, for example, Medicaid, right? When you have a
Mhm.
child who is severely disabled, nobody could afford. I mean, we had in-home nursing care around the clock for 8 years. I mean, you're all on Medicaid. Doesn't matter what, everybody's on Medicaid if in that situation. And when now with the, Department of Education being dismantled, I mean, I know this isn't a political show,
No, no,
but
it's resilience. That's what we talk about.
yeah, so Department of Education being dismantled means that disability rights for children in schools. And again, so
Mhm.
now one of my kids has more typical like IEP and disability rights in that respect. But then I
Mhm.
think about, what would be happening to Dahlia?
Yeah.
It's so scary. Anyway,
That is very scary.
yes, we do have a
I
little cottage in Canada, so who knows? Maybe we'll come and
Come on up.
neighbors with you guys.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I think this conversation, like, it can go on because there's so many different like things happening. And, we are brought here today to talk about your journey, with grief. And, what's happening is a type of grief.
It is a type of grief. And again, what we were saying at the beginning in terms of like, I thought grief was what happened when somebody died. And now realizing, my God, we are all grieving. There is
Mm.
a lot to be grieving. And even the more Hallmark card traditional grief, especially now, at this age, um, everybody's a griever, right? And if they're not, they will be,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it
I
is the most universal thing, as you guys know. And it's just, we
It's a
all
great
experienced it.
equalizer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like the pandemic, an equalizer. Like no one
It's
is
such an
immune to.
equalizer. Nobody's immune. And what is strange is that given that it is the great equalizer, and I call it an equal opportunity emotion, it's so strange that we're just so weird and awkward and uncomfortable and don't know what to say or do and don't want to talk about it. It's like that we should all be fluent.
Well, because of the work you do and the work we do and that our fellow other, grief experts are doing, the conversation is starting to become more normal.
Yeah.
And we're still going to be awkward, but maybe we'll have more tools because grief is awkward.
Grief is
Because
awkward, right? But and even just knowing that we can say this is really weird, like I feel really uncomfortable, and that's
yeah, like
okay.
I am
Yeah.
really fucking sad and
Yeah,
like admitting it and like not functioning. And it's
right.
it's really interesting to even see the conversation change from like for us, like from 6 years ago when my life kind of started to fall apart to now and seeing how more comfortable people are, but we still have a long way to go. And I want to thank you for the work that you do and the writing
Mhm.
that you do because it's helping pave that way.
Well, thank you for what you guys are doing too. And I wonder if you think that it really is that the conversation is changing and people are getting more comfortable, or if it's that you know people who are in the grief space. So in your world, it's more,
I think it's I like on social media, for example, and I'm a vintage millennial, so like I'm of the generation that's starting to be more comfortable talking about the things that aren't just sunshine and rainbows. But I'm seeing more people that aren't grief professionals showing up and sharing their feelings publicly about what they're going through.
Mhm.
So I think it has a lot to do with also people like us who are comfortable sharing.
yeah,
It's like this unwritten, but actually written because it's Facebook statuses or whatever, like permission to show up and share all the things that are happening, the good
yeah,
and the bad. And so I'm seeing a lot of people in my like cohort of age and younger really sharing everything and using social media as an outlet to express their feelings. And I think
mhm.
it's really beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
do
a
too.
very
And I'm so
normalizing.
glad, so normalizing. And I've met such amazing humans this way through social by people who are talk, being real.
Yeah, and I mean, even if those people who aren't comfortable making a huge Instagram post, when people like us or other people show up and share their feelings, it may be that bridge to give them permission to feel comfortable, to get a therapist, or to
Yeah.
acknowledge what they're going through. And that's like our whole purpose. And so, yeah, I do think the conversation is
Vision.
changing. And yeah, and this conversation will hopefully help move the needle even more. And Jessica, before we wrap up, why don't you share a piece of advice maybe for mothers who are at the beginning of a journey similar to yours was with Dahlia?
Yeah. It's hard to just come up with one, but I would say that this is going to define so much of your life. Like, yes, that's true. It's going to define a lot, but it does not define you and it does not define your child. And I think continuing to find those things outside of the disease, and if it's a chronic illness, that can be hard, right? But to find those things that have nothing to do with it, that bring you joy, that create meaning, that, give you beauty, are so important. And those will become perhaps smaller and more ordinary things, but they'll become things that really feel extraordinary. And so I would say also for the parent to have something that is just hers or his, something that, maybe you did before or that you want to kind of take on, whatever it is, so that your whole world doesn't become this one thing.
That's beautiful advice. Thank you. And thank you for joining us on today's
Thank you for
episode.
having me.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to Jessica's story, to, follow along all of our shows, or maybe you're new here. Hi, welcome. Just know that it's okay to not be okay. You're gonna get through those dark days, I promise. We're gonna hold your hand. Let the Global Resilience Project and this podcast be that lighthouse in the storm. And just remember, friends, you are resilient AF. Thank you. That's a wrap for another episode of Resilient AF with Blair and Alana. And thank you for listening. Are you feeling inspired to bounce forward?
Let's connect at theglobalresilienceproject.com, where you can read many stories of resilience, buy our books, shop our clothing line, learn more about how to strengthen your resilience muscle, be empowered, and more.
Remember, friends, you are resilient AF.